All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are tearing into a true American icon, Harley Davidson. We're going to get our hands dirty and dive right into their 2024 annual report to really understand what's going on with this legendary company, the challenges, the strategy, and what the road ahead looks like.
You know, Harley Davidson is so much more than just a motorcycle company, right? It's a symbol. It stands for freedom, for the open road, but behind that powerful brand, the company is actually navigating some pretty serious turbulence. And that puts this icon at a major crossroads, trying to balance its incredible history with a future that is changing, and changing fast.
So, let's get right to the heart of it. The main theme of their 2024 report is pretty clear. It was a rough year. Think about it. High interest rates made buying a big-ticket item like a Harley a lot tougher for people. And as a result, demand for those premium bikes took a real hit. This economic pressure is the backdrop for, well, pretty much everything else we're about to unpack. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the tough year overall. Then we'll get into the core motorcycle business, talk about their big electric bet with Livewire, and see how they finance the whole operation. After that, we'll decode the financials, and finally, look at what they see on the road ahead. Okay, first up, let's talk about Harley's challenging year and the big numbers that really tell the story of 2024. And wow, this one number really sets the stage. Net income for 2024 came in at just over $455 million. Now, that's still a ton of money, but it's a huge drop from the over $706 million they made in 2023. This big dip in profit is really the core problem we're going to be exploring. All right, let's get into the heart and soul of the company, the Harley Davidson Motor Company segment, or HDMC. This is the classic stuff, the big, rumbling V-twin bikes that are famous all over the world. So when you look at where the money comes from, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, the bikes themselves are the biggest piece of the pie at 76%, but look at the rest. Parts and accessories are almost 16%, and even apparel is nearly 6%. It just goes to show you, when you buy a Harley, you're buying into a whole ecosystem, not just the motorcycle. Now, this tells a pretty tough story. Total wholesale shipments to dealers were down over 17%. Ouch. Their most expensive bikes, the Grand American Touring models, saw a drop of about 7.5%. Not great, but manageable. But the other categories? They basically fell off a cliff. Cruisers, a huge seller for them, were down almost 28%. And the sport and lightweight bikes? Down a whopping 32%. This slump in sheer volume is a massive reason for the financial downturn. So how did that hit the bottom line? Well, selling fewer bikes and dealing with higher manufacturing costs really dragged down profits. But here's where they got smart. They made a strategic push to sell more of their most expensive, highest margin bikes, those Grand American Touring models. That clever shift helped soften the blow from the overall drop in sales. Okay, now for something completely different, the electric future. Let's talk about Livewire, Harley's standalone electric motorcycle brand. This isn't just a new bike, you guys. This is a massive, high-stakes gamble on attracting a whole new kind of rider. And it is a very, very expensive gamble. The Livewire division lost almost $110 million in 2024. And when you see they only shipped 612 motorcycles, you realize just how tough the math is right now. So that's the bad news right up front. The electric side is nowhere near profitable yet. But hang on, there's a little bit of good news hidden inside that big, scary number. That 2024 loss, it was actually $7.2 million better than the year before. So while the losses are still huge, they are steering the ship in the right direction, slowly but surely chipping away at that loss. You know, Livewire also has to deal with a whole different world of risks. The EV space is so new, the rules are basically being made up as we go. Things you don't think about, like government subsidies, new state fees for EVs, rules for shipping batteries, even regulations about how quiet or loud they can be. All of this could totally change the game for them. All right, next up, let's talk about the unsung hero of the whole operation, Harley Davidson Financial Services, or HDFS.
If the motor company builds the dream, HDFS is the engine that actually gets that dream out onto the road for a lot of people. It's absolutely critical.
So what exactly does HDFS do? Well, it works in two ways. First, it gives financing to the dealers so they can stock their showrooms with all those beautiful bikes. That's called wholesale financing. Then, it provides loans directly to you, the customer, so you can actually buy that new or used Harley. It really is the grease in the wheels for sales in the US and Canada.
Now, this chart shows a pretty concerning trend, and it connects right back to that tough economy we were talking about. The credit loss rate, that's the percentage of loans that aren't getting paid back, has been creeping up. It went from under 2% in 2022 to over 3.3% in 2024. This tells us that more and more customers are struggling to make their payments, which puts a real strain on the financial services side of the business. And this quote from the report tells you exactly why. The company doesn't mince words. They blame it on the broader economy. Higher interest rates mean higher bike payments, and you combine that with inflation hitting everybody's wallet, well, it's putting a serious squeeze on riders. It's a crystal clear link between the big economic picture and what's happening to everyday people. Okay, let's pull the lens back now and look at the whole picture. In this section, we're going to get into the consolidated company financials. We'll focus on how Harley is managing its cash and what that has really meant for its shareholders.
Now, this is interesting. This move says a lot about what management thinks. Even with the tough year, the board greenlit a huge new share buyback program. And they didn't wait around. They bought back 3 million shares just in the last quarter. When a company does this, it's basically sending a signal that they believe their own stock is a bargain. However, for investors who've been holding on for the last 5 years, it's been a pretty bumpy ride. Let's say you invested $100 in Harley stock at the end of 2019. Well, by the end of 2024, it would have been worth just $88. To put that in perspective, that same $100 in the broader S&P Midcap 400 index would have grown to $163. So the stock has really underperformed, which highlights the long-term turnaround job they've been working on.
All right, last section, let's look to the future. What does management think is coming? This is all about their official guidance for 2025 and their bigger, long-term strategic goals.
So their forecast for 2025 shows they think the tough times will continue. They're expecting income from their financing arm to drop even more, and overall earnings to be flat or even down a bit. But, and this is a big but, there are some bright spots. They're aiming to sell a lot more live wires, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500. And they plan to shrink the operating loss on the electric side down to that $70 to $80 million range.
And this quote right here, this shows you their long game. They're saying, hey, look past 2025. They expect the core motorcycle business to hit a low double-digit operating margin in 2026 and then ramp up to a really healthy 15% in the years after that. That's the big prize their whole hardwire strategy is aiming for. And really, that brings us to the final burning question. Harley Davidson is this incredible legacy brand that's staring down massive change. It's juggling its profitable but shrinking old-school business with a very expensive but maybe high-growth electric future, and it's doing it all in a tough economy. Their hardwire strategy is their big bet. The question is, will it be enough to reignite the legend for a whole new generation? That's what we'll all be watching.